Hello, everyone. My name is Kristen Green, and I am a school psychologist with the Association of School Psychologists of Pennsylvania. I'm very excited to be here today to have a conversation and learn more about one of our fellow colleagues, Dr. Angela McMasters. We are joined today with our president, Dr. Amber Sessoms, and graduate student at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, Mr. Evan Weavers, working towards his educational specialist degree in school psychology. Today, we are very excited to learn more about the passion behind Dr. McMasters' career in school psychology, any advice for future and practicing school psychologists, and learn more about the incredible contributions she has made to our field. With that, Dr. Sessoms, I pass it over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Kristen. Just really an honor to hold space for you, Dr. McMasters. And I want to start out by asking you, tell us about what you do in school psychology.
So my role, I was in a very traditional role for the first 15 years of my career. And then I started to learn a lot more about the science of reading, structured literacy, dyslexia. And I started to learn more about systems and the system inequities that were really existing across the board. And I always felt very passionate about making the greatest impact that I could. So my current role is really focused on systems level change and really creating a safety net for all of our students, so we aren't having anyone that's falling through the cracks.
I love that when you say systems level change, we are systems level thinkers. So I appreciate that you're looking at through that lens. And then following up to that, like, what's the best part for you, right? You got so excited, your face
Yes,
lights
I
up.
did.
So what's the best part for you about being a school psychologist?
The students are by far the very best part. I have amazing administrators and a supportive school board that allows me to be in this diverse role, and that really has acknowledged the importance of a ratio of school psychologists to students that lets you do the work. But my role at the junior high, so I'm grade 6 to 8, I have about 650 students. And because of my role in the system work, I'm in the classrooms often. And we do a lot of like progress monitoring, or I go in and I just talk to the students about their progress. And so now I just love that they kind of find me and they're like, how'd I do? Or they're like, did you see that? Or one student that I had that comes to mind kind of wasn't all about the reading intervention. And then mid-year, I caught her in the library checking out Charlotte's Web, which is one of my favorite books. So I think for me, it's that learning to read is such a critical skill in our society and the ability to be successful, whatever you choose to do. So I guess just giving kids that opportunity, and when everything connects, just seeing that spark. And also, in addition to the literacy, I just feel like I kind of come across the students that just look like they need a connection, or in a building of this size that can be fast paced, they just need a safe space or someone that just can listen to them for a hot second and be an advocate. So that's been cool for me. And I have a 6th grade student that recruits other students for organization now. So I helped him, and now he's incredibly successful. And now he's like, hey, I brought my friend. So it's just been such an incredible experience. So hands down, the students are my biggest why and the greatest joy in this work.
And just as you're reflecting, I'm not hearing a lot of testing and the work that you do. So could you speak to a little bit to like that non-traditional role, the full breadth of your work?
So definitely most of my work around evaluations and reevaluations at the junior high level is triennial, biennial reviews. But we really, because we've had a nice framework for, if there are concerns, I feel like we're better able to build relationships with families too. And I think sometimes that easy answer or response is, let's do an evaluation because that's going to get what we need. But I always think if there's things that we can do now for a student that's going to benefit them, and if we need an evaluation, absolutely we do. And I always tell parents it's on the table no matter what. But if we have this information that we know about your child and we have this system and these options in place, what can we do ahead of an evaluation to try to help your student be successful. And sometimes it works, and sometimes we come to the table and say, listen, we've been doing X, Y, and Z, and we haven't seen the success we hope for, so let's move to the evaluation. So I guess it just has allowed me to build a better relationship with students and families before just jumping in. And I always say, yes, we can do the evaluation, but the amount of time that goes into that process could be better spent with the student, especially if there haven't been interventions that have been tried first.
I appreciate that reflection. And just if you haven't already realized why she's school psychologist of the year, right? Can you just talk about what does it mean to you to be this body, be the school psychologist of the year?
Oh, so I know, so I said this, I was acknowledged at a board meeting with our school board members, and I will say that as one of 4 school psychologists in our district, I felt like I was accepting it on behalf of our whole team, because our whole team is an incredible group of school psychologists. I will say that I do feel like, because of my passion for systems level change, being school psychologist of the year, I feel like it gives me an opportunity to help others learn and grow in the systems work, and to kind of see, it's so easy to talk about it, but holy cow, is systems change the hardest thing for so many reasons. And you can't totally see it, but I have Noster's complex change chart on my board up here, because of the emotions that your system goes through in that process of change. And I guess it was acknowledging the fact that I have an opportunity to almost have a platform to encourage others through the change process, is what School Psychologist of the Year means to me. I've always said I wanted to have the biggest impact that I could on as many students as possible, which is why I felt like, after so many years in a district that I loved and people that I loved, I found a different opportunity. And I found an administrator that would listen. And that story is kind of interesting, and I'm comfortable sharing, but I had a son. Well, I'd gone through my letters training, and all these light bulbs started to go off for me. And I had a son in 1st grade that started to struggle with reading, and I was doing all kinds of things at home, but it was having such a negative impact on our relationship. And so I learned a little bit more that they were doing a lot with balanced literacy. There wasn't a lot of phonics instruction. And I reached out to the superintendent, and he listened. And I said, I'm a community member, I'm a school psychologist, I will do what I can to help, but I have major concerns. I know how to help my child, but what about all the other students in our community that don't have someone who knows what they need, or is able to advocate for what they need, or to ask the right questions? And it wasn't the people. Like, we have amazing, amazing teachers, and I adore so many of them for so many reasons. But that was something else. It was like the system was broken. And so he brought in the experts, and he started to dig into the system and looked at ways to create funding. And I applied for a position, and here I am. So, and I'm happy to say that for my own son's journey, he's in 6th grade now, and he is progressing beautifully and doing really well. And he's not the only one. Like, he's my N of 1 that I kind of talked about in my speech, but there are so many more that have a very similar experience and profile. So
It's like the personal informs the collective, right? So, in thinking about, I'm sure that's one of your biggest accomplishments, thinking about like your own son's growth and how that lights up for you. But what about your most meaningful professional accomplishment to date?
my most meaningful, first of all, I will say that receiving the School Psychologist of the Year award is extremely meaningful to me, as far as one of my greatest professional accomplishments. I reflect on being a graduate student and attending the ASP conference and looking at the people up on stage and thinking, like, am I going to have that kind of impact in my work? And I guess, like, to have that happen for me when I wasn't thinking that maybe I was going to have that potential or ability to do that. So that was my greatest accomplishment. The other would just be, I think, building this system at the junior high for MTSS has been my other greatest accomplishment, and something that I'm so passionate about.
Dr. McMasters, we both attended the Indiana University of Pennsylvania for our graduate training. And so my question is, how did your training and experience at IUP influence your work?
Oh, so I feel like I was incredibly blessed to learn from an amazing group of faculty members. And I know that there had been like a lot of change sort of around the time that I was working on my dissertation project, which was also kind of cool because I had an opportunity to learn from almost like another cohort of instructors and professors. So I feel like some of the greatest takeaways, like I think about Dr. Levinson, who would say, you know, be an effective consumer of research. Like, well, what does that mean? And I'm thinking, okay, like I don't, you know, at that time you're reading so many research articles and like, I don't understand how this is relevant to what I'll do as a school psychologist. Fast forward to being here, and we do have to be effective consumers of research to be able to inform practices and look at systems. The other, Dr. Kovaleski, and multi-confirming data. And don't just have one data point. You have to be looking at multiple data points for students. And that's just a small drop in the bucket because I've continued to learn from Dr. Runge and Dr. Black. And it's just been such an incredible opportunity to see how the program has evolved and to look back on that graduate school experience and see all of that learning come to fruition and how the people that I've encountered on my journey have led me to this place where I can do this work that I'm doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we would all agree that this line of work is very rewarding. I think we would also agree that it has its fair share of stressors. And so kind of thinking back to your first year of working as a school psychologist, what was one challenge you faced, and then how did you kind of overcome that, kind of being an early?
So there's two things that come to mind. And I hope that I've spoken these words to you at some point. First, trust what you know, because I was a school psychologist in a very rural district. I was the only school psychologist coming from an awesome internship. I felt well prepared, and I think I was prepared enough, but I think it was having confidence in my training and really reflecting if I struggle, like what does your training tell you? And what does the data tell you? And I think the other part is to always find your people and to reach out when you have questions. And even still, there are sometimes cases that I'm just like, I've never encountered this before and I'm not quite sure. So it's really having those that you trust that you can rely on, whether it's asking a legal question, an ethical question, doing a case review, and never hesitating to reach out to those in the field that can help you. And also, I think too, when you feel, I remember the first time that I had a really difficult experience with a parent. And I still remember where I was sitting and this person was yelling at me on the phone. And I really look at every case that I do as it's my own child. And at that time I didn't have children. And I remember talking with that person and just trying to digest the way that that was going. And I got off the phone and I burst into tears and I called my supervisor and I was like, I don't even know what to do. I thought I did my best. I was trying so hard. I really think I did what's best by the student. And he's like, and we were in different buildings because I was in an elementary, he's at the administration building. He says, come on up, we're going to have some tea and we're going to talk about this. And I still remember to this day having that acknowledgement that you're going to encounter situations like that. And it is always a good time to reflect because I think my people skills have evolved over time. And I also feel like I was pretty fresh. I think I was in my third year. And so just learning how to build those relationships with parents and families and to be better, to recognize that it's probably not something that you've said or done, but that there's some reason that maybe they had a negative experience or there's different things that is happening behind the scenes. And I think that's the other part about my experience with my own child is so often I sat across the table from parents and listened to them talk about, you know, the homework struggles or the battles at home. But I'm like, we never see that here. You know, we don't have, that's not happening. And then to experience that, I'm like, that is such a real thing. Kids hold it together all day and they go to their safe space and they unravel. And so I think when I have the opportunity to kind of meet parents where they are and not take it personally and just separate that. So finding your people, and having confidence in what you know, but also being willing to learn and grow in those situations is really important and beneficial as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely appreciated kind of seeing how you've, taken that team approach, and when, there is something, you kind of have carved out space, with your other colleagues to kind of come together and support each other. And so that's something that I'm definitely taking with me. So yeah, I mean, I've been blessed, to work with you and kind of have you as my supervisor, and you've given me, a lot of wisdom and shared, tidbits of advice this year. So kind of my final question is, what advice do you have, or final piece of advice do you have for students or early career school psychologists? I know you hit on some things already, but anything else?
Yeah. So the work is hard, but it is such rewarding work that when you keep your why at the forefront, it's going to help you overcome those moments where you're like taking something home with you. And I think that's one of the things too, when you learn the stories and that some of our students have experienced, or what they're carrying with them every day, it's really hard to not take that with you sometimes. And so in those cases, I think my best advice is to meet the student where they are, care for them when they're with you, and do the best that you can. But it comes back to that circle of influence and the things you can control and the things you can't control. And that can be heavy sometimes. So it's really important to make sure that you're tuning into your own needs and recognizing when you need to take care of yourself because of some things that your students are going through that you're helping to support them with. So I think that was something else I would have done differently. And sometimes it's easy to, if you saw my patent spotlight, I think it was, I talked about locating yourself above the line, and that's not always easy, because I've discovered that when there is, whether it's secondary trauma that educators are experiencing, or their own self-care needs, or their own life, it's easy to get into that spiral of negativity and drop below the line and be in this like panic, and nothing's going to work, and we're not going to get anywhere, and it's always just going to be this way, and to really think about like, okay, there might be times that we drop below the line and have to get that out, and that's important. But when you can redirect back to the positives, even in hard situations, it allows you to think outside of the box. And I think the other piece is that on the way home, I always ask myself, because this is a job that it's never like wrapped up and packaged nice when you leave. There's always a list that's usually waiting for you for the next day, and that also never really goes as you expect it to go. So flexibility is important. But I always ask myself, did you do your best today? Did you give your best? Did you do your best? And if I can answer that as yes, then I have to be okay with what I got through in that day. And if it was in the best interest of the students and in alignment with what my values and beliefs are, and our, ethical and legal, guidance. But if I'm there, then I know that I've done my best. So always just ask yourself if you've done your best.
I'm just sitting here and I'm over here in the amen choir, which you were saying, because I think what you said, especially about our own self-care, isn't something that we talk enough about. We can get into this martyr mentality very easily in our work because we're so student-centered at the expense of our own well-being. So I hope the listeners are really taking stock of that, and hopefully we can, if you have resources that you can provide, you're such a wealth of knowledge and resources, and you already talked about a systems change theory that we can share with our listeners. But just thinking about grounding ourselves and who we are and being our full and complete self so that we can continue to serve, but also thinking about that we are in these systems that sometimes can be very oppressive, sometimes can really not allow us to think in innovative ways, because we're like, oh, we can't do that because this administrator is like that. You kind of talked about that earlier, having an administrator that's listening. How is that in this moment where you are currently, because you have such collaboration? allows you to freedom dream, as I like to call it, and thinking about what's the next project or goal for you in this next season of your life?
Um, oh, that's such a great question. So I ponder that a lot myself because I kind of keep feeling like there is something bigger, and not bigger than the work that I'm doing, but like, I guess it's to continue to help my team along that growth journey. And I also think um, at PDE last week, Dr. Nicole Holland Sims she talked about loving our students and loving ourselves. And she said, and some people don't like to use the word love in education, so I call it unconditional positive regard. And I think my next goal, in addition to the systems work that I'm doing, is that we need to love them from where they are. And it's that cultural mindset and shift, which is shifting a lot as far as like, I think it's easy in a junior high or a middle school setting to think, kids come equipped and they have the tools and they're ready. But sometimes that's more often than not the case. And so I think it is, their students aren't engaging in this behavior to make your day harder or because they don't like you. The behavior is communicating a need. So what is the need that it's communicating? So I just kind of feel like that's the next piece for me, is really focusing on ways to build connections with students. And I also think that student voice is really important. So and this is where I love my administrators, because I said, we talk a lot about teachers, being on the lookout for students they have a connection with, or we offer strategies for connection. But if we ever ask the students who they feel connected with at school, and if they don't feel like they have a connection to anyone, because those are the students that we need to be like working on building that connection for them, so that they know where their place is and that they can see the good that they have inside them, because that's the part of the system that I think sometimes it's easy to miss, because we have internalizers or students that just go through their day. And so I think that would be my next goal, is focusing on building connections, and that's also connections with students. And they bring me so much joy. So.
Well, Dr. McMasters, on behalf of ASP, we want to thank you for all of your insight, your advice, and really the reflection on the impact that school psychologists can have on system level changes. But I really appreciate, in listening to you, the power of your words and the power of those unconditional positive regard or love, meeting students and others where they're at, and really keeping the why at the forefront. These are all really, really important and meaningful things that all of us as school psychologists and future school psychologists need to remember and bring to the forefront of our everyday practice. I really would just like to thank, again, Dr. McMasters for her time and congratulate her on being the School Psychologist of the Year.
Thank you.
I would also like to thank our president, Dr. Amber Sessoms, for being here today and helping to facilitate a lot of meaningful conversation around school psychology. And finally, I would love to thank Mr. Evan Weaver, the student from Indiana University and Dr. McMasters' intern, as one of the transitional voices between those in the practicing profession and those of us who are early career or soon to be practicing school psychologists. So thank you everyone for your time, and thank you to our listeners. Hopefully you took away some meaningful things that you can practice in your everyday life. And don't forget to congratulate and reach out to Dr. McMasters on her amazing success.